Hey everybody out there in internet land, watching on YouTube, through Crowdcast, through G+. We are live streaming today, and this is episode 36 of the Holy Shift Show. My name is Elaine Nieverding, and we are gathering together to get through these paradigm shift times with a little bit more levity, a little bit more mutual support, and who knows, a little bit more lighthearted, levitating, collaborative spirit. Today we are having another F-word show. You know, if you've watched this show before, I've said before, my favorite word that starts with F and ends with K is not an expletive, but it's flock. And we invite people to gather together in what I call here the flocker room to have some fun conversation that can lift us up and move us forward in the days ahead. We have an F-words titled show today. Imagine that. It's called Finding Fabulous. I found a new friend in a woman who's here from Canada. I think she's from Toronto. And she is the author of a new Amazon best-selling book, Finding Fabulous. No surprise, right? And we're going to be talking about embarking on this journey to create a more fabulous life, making the shifts that we need to experience more fulfillment. So I want to say hi to Lisa and then Molly Youngblood Geiger, and let everybody know kind of what's in store for this hour ahead here on the Hangout, and also in the next hour on Blab. So hi there, Lisa. Tell me where you are hanging out from.
Hi, Elaine. Thanks for having me on your show. Today I'm actually in Windsor, Ontario, which is directly across from Detroit, Michigan, for those people that don't know their Canadian geography. I'm about 3 hours south of Toronto today. I'm at my sister's place. So thank you for having me.
That's beautiful. And so I am broadcasting this Hangout on air within a wrapper that is called the Crowdcast wrapper. And it has some features that allow me to like timestamp elements of this show, so people who watch the replay on Crowdcast can actually go to sections of the show if they just want to watch a portion or revisit part of it. And so I'm going to, because I just remembered, flock, yes, I just remembered, I have to push this start answering thing. So, yes, we started out the show talking about F-words, flockers, fun, and it's fall, you know, so it's a good time to shed old habits, old thoughts, old perceptions to find our way to freedom and indeed finding fabulous. Okay, so we also have with us today Molly Youngblood Geiger, and Molly has been I'll call her a frequent flyer here on the Holy Shift Show, and she has a digital marketing agency from F-Word, Florida, and she is also a Google Rising Star and a ambassador in the Google Small Business Partners community. So say hi, Molly. I know we're going to hear some stories from you today about your journey to finding fabulous.
Yes, absolutely. My name is Molly Youngblood Geiger. My agency's name is Design Right For You, and we're based out of Jacksonville, Florida. I do participate with Google on several different platforms. I'm a Google Rising Star, Google Partners Community Ambassador, and I am also a Google Small Business Community Advisor. And I look forward to the show today, and sharing one of my experiences was actually led me to opening my agency.
Wow, how about that? So we will weave in that story into the program. I'd also like to acknowledge now my fine flock of followers who mostly learned of me over on Google+, which is still a fun social media platform. I wish more people would discover it. There's still a lot of great value there. So for all of you who are watching live and replay from my old flock And new people who are finding me, welcome, welcome, welcome. Please add your comments over on the Crowdcast arena. And if you haven't gone there yet, please go to ccst.io/Elaine Nieberding, and you'll see how my name is spelled right here on my banner below. Elaine Nieberding 12. And that's how you can watch this in the Crowdcast wrapper and have really fun engagement. So I encourage you to do that. So right now, I want to let folks know there is one more guest who I am crossing my fingers. She might be able to pop in late, and that is Margarita Crystal Lotus. And some of you who watch Hangouts on Air programs or Blabs have seen her around there as well. Maybe she will show up as well. But right now, I would like to go back over to Lisa. And Lisa, I would really love to hear your story of your movement out of the corporate arena and about the birthing of this project and this book, Finding Fabulous.
Yes, thanks, Elaine. That's a good terminology for the book, is birthing, birthing a book. It's certainly a process that takes time and energy and effort. Can be painful at times, but at the end of the day, brings you something joyful, a joyful little baby. My book. Yeah, you know, we want to start in my story is that I worked in a large corporation for 15 years, and every year I kept, you know, trying to think what my life was going to look like 5 or 10 years down the road, and I didn't really have a. Everybody would say, you know, what is your 5-year plan? I didn't really feel like I had a 5-day plan, but I was going along, and I guess I sort of got swept up with the corporate life, and you know, never really took the time to really stop and think about exactly what I wanted out of my life. And so eventually, I became really, really unsatisfied and unfulfilled with my job, and I almost felt guilty about it. You know, I had this great job that everybody else would have loved, you know, in terms of salary and benefits and perks and all of these things. And yet I was really frustrated and restless and felt like I really wasn't tapping into my potential. And so it wasn't until my company was doing some major changes that I started to think about, where do I want to go next? Okay, so if I'm unhappy, maybe I just go get another job, look at what opportunities are in my company. And I just came to the conclusion that I wanted to leave. They were actually doing some major cuts, and I started thinking about people losing their jobs. And I thought, what if I kept my job? And so the moment I realized I was more afraid of keeping my job than losing my job, it was a huge aha for me. And I also had a problem thinking that people were going to lose jobs they wanted to keep when I would keep a job that I didn't want. And that was really the biggest impetus for me to say, wait a second here, you know, I'm afraid of keeping my job. That's crazy. And so that was the time when I knew I had to leave.
So, like, how many years ago was that? That point where you actually made the decision?
Yeah, it was. It's coming up on 3 years, actually.
Wow, that's all. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be about 3. It'll be 3 years at the end of the year, end of November, and so yeah, it's been quite a journey since then. But it was interesting because it was one of those decisions that was both freeing, liberating, and petrifying at the same time, mainly because I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do once I left. So, you know, that day, I mean, I was literally standing in my kitchen when sort of the aha moment struck me, and I remember thinking that, you know, this feeling of, oh my God, what am I going to do next? But also knowing deep down that it was completely the right decision to do. It was like, as soon as I made the decision, it was this like, like it was this big relief. You know, I let out a breath I'd been holding for 15 years almost.
So there was something very impactful about the power of that decision. So I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about how making that decision was fuel to move you forward, that then evolved into this idea of finding other people who had, you know, made the transition, and that you then began this process of finding and interviewing people. So, Yeah, tell me about
Yeah,
that.
the first thing, the whole F word of freedom is really what hit me. In fact, we used to joke, there's a retirement savings company here in Canada called Freedom 55, and I was 39 at the time when I made the decision, so I used to joke that I was retiring and that I was getting Freedom 39. And although it started out as a joke, that's exactly how I felt, was completely free. And I remember driving downtown Toronto and having this epiphany that I could do absolutely anything I wanted. And I guess I had spent 15 years looking through the lens or the eyes of my company saying, oh, I guess I could work in that department or take on that job, or I guess I could aspire to that role. But it was really like this tunnel vision of what I could do. I worked for the largest company in my industry, and so I wasn't really looking outside of the company for other jobs, but I always sort of had this lens of what would I do next. And the moment that I had that decision of it's time to go, I realized I could do anything. And I'd be driving down the street going, that guy does something. The person who made that sign does something. The person who created that product does something. And it was like this bubble burst. I say it was like a bubble bursting moment, because all of a sudden it was like the lens or the filter of which I was looking at my opportunities through completely cleared for me. And it felt like endless possibilities. So in that was the freedom part of it. And then, if you will, I could if you want me to describe the part about going to look for others, that was the petrifying and not knowing what I was doing part of it.
Yeah, I really would like to hear how, again, how the emergence of the idea to find others developed, and then at some point you thought, okay, I'm learning about this, and what I learn can also help others, or the evolution to your new line of work is basically sharing this kind of message.
Yeah, I think right away when I left my corporation, I'd worked in a job where I was traveling all the time, and so I didn't know a lot of people in the city that I was living in at the time, other than family, and I had a few friends, but I really didn't know a lot of people because I was constantly on the road. And so I decided to join a networking group. I thought, I can't just leave my job and then be sitting here in my living room by myself. And so I joined a women's business networking group, and that's kind of when the seeds for the book, I think, were planted, was because I met all of these women, and as they stood up at this networking meeting to explain why they were doing what they were doing, there were so many of them that were either had chose to go out on their own to follow a passion, or they had been downsized and or fired from their jobs and had to find something new. There was all different stories, but at the heart of it, they had all had to start over and had gone on this journey, and this transformational journey, and they all seemed to be so much happier now than they had been in the past. And so I guess it was a little bit of just wanting the answers for myself, where I started to actually interview these women to find out, how did you do this? Why did you do this? What were some of the obstacles that you faced? And initially it was purely just a selfish way of getting the information for me. Until I realized the more I would tell people that I was interviewing others, they'd say, oh, I want to read that book. I got someone who could read that book. And so I started to realize, oh, I guess I should probably write a book about this experience, and share the wisdom and the insights that I was gaining from people that were actually, in the trenches, finding their fabulous.
Yeah. So, Lisa, I know you've told me, and we've heard a little bit about your company was doing downsizing, so that started having you reflect differently, and then ultimately you made the decision. And I want to weave Molly's experience back into this a little bit. And Molly, if you would share with us this idea of experiencing frustration because the creative work that you did provided great benefit for your company, or the organization you were working for, and yet things got really kind of messed up, putting you in a place of a lot of frustration. Share that story that led to your decision to leave.
Sure. So I used to work for a very large banking institution. I was brought in to fix a reporting error. When I first entered their department, their reporting accuracy was at about 68%. I'm not going to go into the nuts and bolts of it, but the short version is I figured out what was causing the error, and I decided one day to build a database. And so from this database, I came up with the idea that, well, instead of just blindly reporting what we have on our computer system, why don't we take what we refer to as an EDI report, and cross-reference the reports, have it spit out the errors, fix them, and then send in the report. And so I did that, and our accuracy went through the roof. We started getting 99.9% reporting every month, every quarter, consistently for the next couple of years. And it was around that time that the very large Freddie Mac, very well-known investor, they came up with the concept of a technology servicing award, where if you had used technology to solve a problem with reporting, they were encouraged.
Oh my F word. Molly is frozen.
Oh no! Can you see me? Am I back?
I think I can hear you again.
Okay,
can we hear you now? Let's see. Yes, you're back.
Okay, sorry about that. So I think where I left off, where I got frozen, Freddie Mac had come up with this award, and I thought, just throw it in there. I really didn't expect anything to happen. I personally don't think a database is a big deal. But it turns out that I was one of 10 people in the entire United States that won the Freddie Mac Technology Servicing Award. At the time, I had been on.
Wow.
I really didn't expect that to happen at all. So at the time, I had been on disability. I'd been in a car accident. My management notified me, hey, you won this award. Get your doctor's notes. We'll fly you up there and get your award. Well, I did that, got my doctor's note. When I went back, they decided, oh, we'll go ahead and just send your supervisor on your behalf. I thought, okay, there wasn't really a whole lot I could do about that. And then a couple weeks later, I got my pink slip. And it was at that point you have to imagine I'm on disability. I haven't been working. I'm not feeling well. I've gotten this news that I've won this national award, and then I get fired. And I was just blindsided. I didn't know what to think. And it was right then and there, I decided that if I was going to work that hard to solve a problem for someone, that I was going to do that for me. And that's the moment I decided to open Design Right for You. And I really didn't have a plan. All I knew is if I was going to take and work that hard for somebody, I was going to do it for me. And honestly, if you told me, this is 13 years ago, that what I've accomplished in the last 13 years ago, I would have never thought it would happen. I mean, I've participated with Google on several different platforms. I regularly interact with Googlers and managers at the Googleplex. They come to me and they ask me for feedback on different things that they're working on. So, I think that's a really neat story, and that's why I wanted to share my story, because you just never know what's going to happen until you make that decision to go out on your own and just give it a shot.
To indeed say there has to be something better, more fabulous. I'm going to start this journey. And some of the things that Lisa details in her book, I'm sure you have done along the way. So now I'm going to go back to Lisa to basically tell us, like, the components, the kind of things that that are in this book. Hold on a minute. I'm gonna. Once you make the decision, then you got to get the courage and then go on this journey. So tell us about the different aspects of the journey, Lisa, and really, because your book and the companion workbook go into this, who is this for? Is this solely for people who are leaving, corporate jobs? Couldn't the kind of insight and guidance that you provide here also be for retirees, or even for entrepreneurials and people who have made that bold leap, but maybe they haven't had the support system or thought through some of the things before they made the decision, before they took the leap?
Yeah, it's interesting because this book, when I went on a journey, I was on my journey, obviously. I'm still on my journey as I was writing this book, and I toggled back and forth between this being sort of a book about careers and this being a book about life. And I think where I end the book, and as you read through the book, by the time I get to the end of it, I'm really saying you can't separate them. A fabulous life implies that that your work is just part of your life. It's not the all-encompassing part of it. And so I think you're right. It could be relevant to people, that anybody that's looking for a major change in their life. It's just so happens that the people that I interviewed, which I call Fab Finders in the book, the career shift, making a major career shift, was just the impetus for their change and their transformation of their life. But it ended up changing how they looked at their life in general, from what they wanted in their life to the kind of lifestyle that they lived, to the way they measured their success, to the way they look at their happiness. All of that changed as well. And so certainly anybody, even if someone is retiring, the idea here is that we find fabulous. We don't wait to retirement to find fabulous. But if people are at that stage of retirement, that they also are looking at their life and saying, okay, what needs to shift for me to find even more fabulous? So definitely. And Molly's story actually is not that unique in some regards. I kind of assumed when I started interviewing people that I would be interviewing people that were really unhappy with what they did for a living, really miserable in their jobs. And I actually found a lot of people like Molly who actually really liked what they did for a living, but the environment in which they did that was not conducive to the life they wanted to live. So, Molly, you're talking about not receiving the recognition and the reward and the acknowledgement even for the type of work, the great work that you're doing. And I'm sure that was probably against your values too. Had it been one of your colleagues who'd won that award, I'm sure you would have wanted that recognition for them as well. And so there is a section in the book that I talk about that, is that even if you are doing something that you really like to do, sometimes the lack of fabulous is just in the environment that you're surrounded by, the people, the place, the time of day you work, or whatever it might be. So we go through some of that in the book as well. The biggest part of the book, if I had to describe it, I would say that the biggest thing is that I go through three big things in this book, and they were the three biggest questions that I had when I was making the decision to leave. The first one was really understanding people's motivation for change. Because change is hard. It's I don't like the word easy, but it is certainly more simple to just stay put and go with the status quo than it is to actually change. We know the stats are something like 80% of people are miserable, or at least unhappy and unsatisfied in their jobs. So what is it? I wanted to understand motivation for people to make these big leaps of faith. So there's a big section on that, getting really clear on what is it that you're looking for, and why do you want to make this change? And then the next part of the book is really once you make that decision, what are the biggest hurdles and what are the biggest obstacles? I wanted to sort of be prepared. So I'm going to make this change. We read all the time, go find your fabulous, or go live your purpose, or find a job where you're passionate about it. But what does that look like when people actually do it? Because there's all sorts of challenges that come up. And the next section of the book, there's 4 chapters on the big buckets that I found talking to the Fab Finders as to what the big obstacles were in actually moving forward towards that. And then at the end, I wanted to know what's on the other side. Is the grass greener on the other side? What are the outcomes of doing this? So if I'm brave enough to make the choice, and I'm persistent enough to go through all the obstacles, what is the outcome at the end of it? What does success look like for somebody who in all intents purposes sort of had success, or traditional societal success? What does it look like when you completely flip that upside down and look from a different perspective?
So I will have you talk a little bit more about some of the stories of some of the Fab Finders, but I'm aware that in the book, that at the end of each chapter, there are some questions to get people started on this self-inquiry. And then I understand that you also created a companion workbook that goes into the inquiry process in a whole lot more depth. And that sounds like something very valuable, something even that someone might want to work on with even the help of a coach. So have you, is it your hope that even some coaches find this book valuable for use? Because sometimes people feel like they can't do it alone. They have to build a support network.
Yeah, and there's actually an entire chapter in the book about support and building a support network and building it in a very I call it weaving a tapestry, because we need more than one kind of support as we go through this process. But I think you're right. I mean, initially I just started putting a couple questions at the end of each chapter that I thought, that I was even going through, and it sort of built out to be a little bit bigger than that. And I call them the roadmap to finding fabulous, because what I found was that a lot of you can be inspired by someone's story, and your awareness of possibilities can be expanded. But at the end of the day, you need to still put it through your own filter. What does that look like in my life? Like, that's really interesting for that person. Could I take some of that and apply it to my own life, and what would it look like? And so the questions are really meant for people to go through that process, to really customize it or personalize it, to say it can be a fairly generic topic of go find some fabulous, but it's like, what does that mean for me? And so that's what the purpose of it was. Whether you're doing that as I think the questions lend for someone to be able to start that work on their own, but definitely, as you learn again from the chapter on support, that I'm a big proponent of having support in doing that. So whether it's a coach that you go to, whether you watch a video series, whether you go to conferences, and actually even dig a little bit deeper. This certainly gets people going, and that's why I created the companion workbook, because after a few people had gone through my book, they said, okay, now I need space, I need exercises to actually do this work that you're suggesting at the end of each chapter.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up this whole idea that we need a flock of people around us to support the new vision that it's unfolding, and people that we can feel safe with also as we're having difficulty or frustration on the journey, because I imagine there are things that come up that you may not expect to come up once you make this decision, and or some people, when they find this new sense of freedom, say, I can have fun again. But then, if they don't have the right support systems in place, they might indeed lose their focus and even be doing some stuff that is just far too frivolous, that doesn't really move them forward to an ongoing life of fulfillment. So
I think having a support system is so important, and that's a really good point that you bring up, because I can say for myself, I had that support system. I had my family, my friends, as of within the last couple of years, the Google Partners community, the whole community is based on helping other agencies with, AdWords or websites or analytics or whatever their question is. And I think when you have the support in place, it makes defining that goal so much easier, because you really do feel like, hey, there are people out there pulling for me to make this venture successful.
Yes, and I talk about, the reason I talk about it in the book is I really break it down to be more specific, even because you're right, we need that support system. And I found along my journey, and when I interviewed different fab finders, is people have different degrees of support. So when I would ask them about what support looked like, it was a question that started more like, what did the support system look like around you? Do people think you were crazy? Because sometimes when you make these big leaps and you decide to go, as Molly did, out on her own, there might have been people around you saying, well, why don't you just go find another job with another company that's similar? You have all the experience, and the headhunters are like banging on your door and like giving you a gift-wrapped job. And some people are like, are you nuts? And so when I talked about support with the individuals that I interviewed, the support ranged. So some people would say, a lot of times it was about a spouse, the support from a spouse or from close friends. A lot of times it was the inner circle that was the biggest challenge. And it comes from a good place. People love you and they care about you and they want you to do well. And if you're going off into a direction that they don't understand, there's a bit of fear from them as well. And so I would have some of the fab finders would say, well, my husband loves me and supports me, but he wants to know when I'm going to start making money again.
Oh, yeah.
And then I would have another fab finder who was really succeeding in her business, who said, my husband and I are both entrepreneurs, and so we trade off the chores at the house and the responsibilities with the kids depending on whose job needs the attention the most at that time. And I thought, see, that's two different levels of support. In both cases, the husbands, love them, support them, want them to do well. But in one case, it's added pressure of, when are you going to start doing well, or let me help you do well. And so I started understanding that there were not only different kinds of support, but there were different levels, certainly, in how people gain that. And then in the book, I talked to you about how you can proactively start to build that around you, because sometimes the people that you know right now may not be the best resources that you need to move forward into a space that is brand new for you.
And sometimes you find new arenas of support or communities of support, and you just kind of happen upon them. When I was leaving bedside nursing, this was in December of 2013, I knew that I was still going to have a source of some support, because I was going to be providing some care to my aging parents. They are in their mid-90s, and they actually were, because they valued my help and knew I was actually partially making the decision to leave nursing because I wanted to provide care for them. I also knew it was a period of my life where I would have more freedom to explore finding my voice in talking about holistic nursing, health and wellness, and personal growth and development in new arenas. But I was getting a little money from them every month, so that gave me the freedom to begin. But when I started taking a Hangout Marketing Challenge course, I met a community of people that then, as I started finding my voice into, in this arena, it was so clear and strong. And did my husband get this? Heck no. He was thrilled to see me providing loving care and support that only I could provide for my parents. Yes. Was he a little reassured and happy that they had some means to gift me with some of that support? Heck yes. So that's a little bit about my story. But I now want to shift really into hearing some of these inspirational stories of the Fab Finders. Some of the most unique ones, maybe, Lisa, that you came across that gave you insight into expanding your perception of the possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many that I love. I love the story of a mechanical engineer who ended up doing therapy on horses, and I thought, because it's such a different thing, and how would you expect that? I talk about an auto worker who ended up he does entertaining hypnosis. And his story is kind of interesting because he took an interesting path, and it really required him to have complete faith in himself. And so he was, at the time, working at one of the big auto factories. And he was from a small town where actually having one of those jobs was what you aspired to as a teenager. He said, all our parents worked at the factory. It was good money. It was good benefits. And you knew you'd have that job probably until you retired. And so his vision of what fabulous was as a teenager was that, until he went into the factory, and 5 years in was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. It was just something that was draining him. And he thought, here I have the job everybody wanted, in this small town. And so he went out and he tried a bunch of different things as an entrepreneur. And one of the things he did, he was starting up a cookie retail business, sort of like a Mrs. Fields, but it was a different brand here in Canada. And he opened it at the time of the recession. And so he had some challenges with the actual business. But because business was slow, he ended up doing all these magic tricks for his customers just because he loved magic. Yeah, and so he spent all his time doing magic tricks instead of really running his business. And it's sort of, I'll make the story a bit shorter, but he ends up happenstancing across a customer who got him into doing magic for restaurants and entertaining clients. And eventually, he went into a hypnosis show. It was an entertaining hypnosis show, and he loved the idea of hypnosis. Probably wasn't that different from the magic in the sense that it was an entertaining version of hypnosis. and he decided that he wanted to be an entertaining hypnotist, I guess you'd call him. And so he took this idea of magic, and he had a couple contacts from doing these magic shows for different restaurants. And when somebody suggested that they could get him a gig at one of the local colleges, he told them that he was an entertaining hypnotist, and he wasn't at the time. He had no idea how to do it. And so, but he was entertaining enough to book himself the gig. And so he had 3 months to figure it out. And I love his story because I thought, first of all, the chutzpah that must have taken, that pure, clear, like, I want to be an entertaining hypnotist, so I'm just going to tell people that I already am. And so within 3 months, he had to actually teach himself how to do it. And then the day that he stepped on that stage to do the show for everybody, he had yet to actually do it on anybody. And so he's in front of like 300.
Talk about a leap of faith.
Leap of faith. It's the biggest leap of faith. And I absolutely love it because I hear all the time, we talk about, people talk about manifesting and the secret and act as if and have faith. And I'm like, how much faith did it take to stand up in front of 300 people and do an entertaining hypnosis show, having no clue whether it was going to work or not? In fact, he said literally this first little trick that he did, he was kind of like, he was waiting like the audience were to see if it worked. And so when it actually did work, obviously it gave him this incredible amount of confidence. And, he said to this day, he thinks back anytime he's really scared to do anything, he thinks back to that moment, and he said he'll never be as scared as he was that moment on that stage. And that gave him this confidence that he could pretty much do anything he wanted. And so he's built an entire speaking business and entertaining business. He gets paid 5 figures an hour to do what he loves to do. When you talk to him, he says, I would do it for free. I just charge people so that to have to go to the airport and to pack my bags and to leave my family. That's why they pay me for. But he absolutely just loves it. And it's like, who knew when he was that 19-year-old kid getting the job at the auto factory, that one day he would be getting paid to make people laugh the way that he does. Yeah. So
I'm so glad you're bringing up laughter. And, just all these serendipitous events that kind of unhappen and flowed forward for him, they did, in a way, help him rediscover this whole thing about playing and pretending. And as adults, or as we grow up in our lives, given our culture and our conditioning, our capability to play and pretend and have fun in our work and service largely gets conditioned out of us. And so when somehow we get back into this acting as if, playing, pretending thing, it can just open up whole new worlds. It also brings me back to thinking about the work of best-selling author Danielle LaPorte. She wrote a book that came out a couple years ago called
The Desire Map?
The Desire Map. The Desire Map. And the most compelling part of that book for me was her saying, the journey has to feel the way you want the destination to feel. In other words, you might have the vision, of this job, this business, this office, this, service you're going to be providing. And it's not just a physical thing that you imagine, but when you start imagining the feeling of being in that, and then say, how can I start every day living and breathing and desiring to open up into those feelings, then I won't be putting my experience of success way out into the future. I will be unfolding it every day. And some would say, I'm then magnetizing to me more of that for my most perfect life of flow and fabulousness and fulfillment. So, talk about that feeling component. And are there sections of the book that get people to really explore that whole feeling component?
Yeah, I would say the whole last section, which is the outcomes, there's two chapters there, one on success and one on happiness. And I couldn't decide if they needed to be two chapters, but they worked out to be two chapters because people look at them in different ways. But the whole idea is actually redefining success for yourself and what success is. And so it really is, you're saying, like, let's not wait until down the road when we're successful. But my whole, what I came across as I was talking to the Fab Finders is that when you start to redefine what success even looks like for you, then you can start to have those feelings of success along the way. And so, if your only idea of success is making $1 million and living in a giant mansion, then you're sort of putting off your satisfaction and acceptance of your success along the way. Whereas, one of the interesting Fab Finders in the book that I spoke to, he uses happiness as his measure of success. And so it also became a filter for his decisions along the way. So instead of just saying, okay, one day I'll be happy and then I'll know I'm successful, instead what he does is every single day when he's making decisions for his business, he's like, if I made this decision and spent my time doing this, will I be happier? Will this make me happy? Will it add to my happiness? And so, when you have that filter of success as being happy, it allows you to feel it as you go. And so I think, hopefully, I think that's the question that you were asking me, is that really redefining what we see as success and how we're measuring and recognizing our own happiness along the way. And so I really dive into that a little bit because one of the questions I kept asking the Fab Finders was, how does this idea of success and happiness evolve along your journey?
I agree with that 100%, and I think it's so important to have that support and have people who make you happy in your life, because I know just for myself, I went through an experience, I'm not going to share any details, where I had an individual in my life who was making me very unhappy, and I could tell that it was affecting my business, and I had to make the decision, well, do I want to continue involving this unhappy person in my life and watch my business fail, or do I need to just sever ties with them and watch my business flourish? Well, I chose the latter of the two. And since I parted ways from that individual, my business has just flourished. I mean, I'm getting business all across, all around the world. My involvement with Google has improved. I mean, it's just, I'm not even really looking to improve my business, and it's just flourishing. So I think having the support and having the part of being happy is so important when you go on a venture like this, because they really are two integral parts of being successful.
So we are now coming to about the last 10 minutes of our show. I'm going to invite each of you, Lisa and Molly, just to share a final thought before I ask Lisa to tell about where she can find her book, and Molly, if there's anything upcoming for you that you'd like to let people know about. But I'm going to start out with my own final thoughts and reflections. This broadcast is occurring during the autumn. It happens to be October 27th of 2015, and it is here in North America, especially in the climate I live in. It's a time when the deciduous trees are, it's fall. It is autumn. There's all this clutter. There's all this period of stuff falling down. It's letting go. It's a new season. And the impetus of this season helped me get clear that it was a time in my life when all the decluttering of physical stuff in my life that I have just been putting off, I have embarked on really tackling it. But tackling it in a fun way, because now I'm doing a weekly blab where I'm inviting other people in, and we're sharing the journey and the process together. But as I've been exploring the Marie Kondo method of decluttering, she keeps getting us back to this feeling component. You want to keep what sparks joy. And if it doesn't, you let it go. And so that's That's environments, that's people, that's relationships, that's the level of complexity that we've built into our life. We can make things simpler, and it starts with valuing ourselves enough to say, it is time to make that leap. Let me jump on over to Molly. Just if you have a final word or two, just about anything that you've gleaned during our conversation today.
Yeah, I think some of the advice that both of you shared, is spot on. We all have, I'm a firm believer, we all have our mission. We're all put on this earth for a reason. And when we can define why we're here, what we want to do with our lives, and we can surround ourselves with supportive, happy people. And as you mentioned, it may not be easy to end that relationship. It may not be easy to go to a different venue. It may be hard for you, but it's something that you have to take that leap of faith. You have to be positive, and you have to believe in yourself. And if you do, it will happen. I can personally say, I can attest that, yes, there were times I didn't know what I was doing. There were times I was afraid. There were times that I thought, what am I doing? Am I crazy? But I took that leap of faith knowing that, well, if I didn't try, I would never know. I would never know, well, would I have been successful if I tried it? And so I would share with the audience, at least try it. Give yourself a chance. Believe in yourself. Support yourself. Surround yourself with people who love you, who are happy, and want to see you succeed.
That's beautiful. Okay, Lisa, you've given us a beautiful overview of your book. I'm thrilled at the conversation we've been able to share together to hit on the key points. But is there any new thought or takeaway that you've even had just in our discussion that we've had today?
Yeah, I love that you just did the reference. It's going to tie into what you and Molly just said, because something just occurred to me too as you were tying into the fall. Right now I'm in Canada, and certainly we have all seasons where I live in Canada, so the leaves are all changing and falling as well here. And I think the journey of finding fabulous is very similar to the changing of the seasons, and that we all go through this. Molly's mentioned that we're all here to serve a purpose, and sometimes, I do believe that we have lots of purposes. Sometimes we don't know our next purpose until we fulfill the one that we're doing right now. And so I think it's this cycle that we get to, and we know when it's time for a change. Sometimes we resist it and we choose not to do anything about it, but when the leaves are falling, it's time for a change. And sometimes it can feel really cold and harsh, like winter does. It feels like a part of us is almost dying, but we can remember that even through the struggle of winter, that there's a purpose for winter, that we're getting ready for new growth. And when you can go through that harsh, cold winter, what comes after that is spring. And we all know what happens with spring. The birds start singing again, the leaves start popping up as green as can be, and then we get the nice warmth, joy and loveliness of summer, which Molly's feeling in her business right now as it's completely grown and blossomed, and she's got flowers all around her, and she's like, where did these come from? And so as she's enjoying that, she may know that eventually something needs to change, as your direction, Molly, too. Like, we could talk to you in 2 years, and you could say, my business completely evolved into something I didn't even know was happening, and that there may come a time when it's autumn for your business again. And so I think it's pretty, it's poetic, really, to think that this journey of finding fabulous is cyclical like the seasons, and that it comes around more than once. And so we may have a big, huge change in our life with maybe it's initiated by a career right now, maybe it's initiated, like Molly mentioned, by a relationship, but that we continue to find fabulous in our lives, not just outside of our lives, but maybe even also looking inside and seeing what's already fabulous that we're maybe not even recognizing or appreciating on a day-to-day basis. So yeah. I would say finding fabulous is all around us.
Yeah. What a rich discussion today. And so it's now time to ask Molly. Molly, if folks have been inspired by your story, they've gotten acquainted with you, how can they get in touch with you? Do you have any particular online events coming up that you want to let us know about?
Sure. So every quarter we have the Google Partners Connect event. It's a live hangout stream from the Googleplex. I believe the next one's going to be in early December, so we have a little bit of time, but I will announce it publicly across my social networks. If you have questions for me, you can find me on Google+. Just go Google my name, Molly Youngblood Geiger. I'm all over the place. You can also visit my website, which is designrightforyou.com. That's DESIGNRIGHT, the number 4, the letter U.com. Primarily, my agency, we provide website design, development, graphic design, search engine optimization, pretty much anything to do with computers, internet, being online, we handle.
That's beautiful. And Lisa, so how amazing that your book has, just shortly out of the gate, and you're already an Amazon bestseller. I want to congratulate you for having beautiful endorsements by Janet Bray Atwood, the author of The Passion Test, and one of the founding members of the Transformational Council. I'm forgetting the name of that.
Transformational Leadership Council, yeah.
Leadership Council. And also, Marcy Scheimhoff has also given you a great endorsement. But tell us how folks can find the book and even gain the bonus companion workbook.
So the book is on Amazon.com and on Amazon.ca, although the .ca, so if you've got Canadian listeners, the paperback version is actually delayed till November 7th. But it is available on Amazon.com right now in both the Kindle and the paperback version. But if you go to lisadad.com or even lisadad.com/book, it will take you over to where you can capture the companion workbook. So it'll have you go to Amazon to buy the book, and then you can sign up, and I'll email you the PDF workbook that you can use to go through the answers. It's for the people that really want to dive in and do the work, and not just be inspired by others, but actually start to take steps themselves to finding their fabulous. And I always point out to people that the word finding is an action verb, because it requires that we actually act and move in the direction of our own fabulous. So lisadad.com.
And also, it occurs to me, fabulous is a great adjective, word, but I also love fabulousness, the essence of being fabulous. And we can claim that today, now, in this moment, and even tap into the power of those I am statements,
Mm-hmm.
They can be very powerful. So we have had a beautiful 50 minutes or so with Molly Youngblood Geiger, Lisa Dodd, and I am Elaine Nieberding, and we are now going to jump on over to another new video live streaming platform called Blab. And so if you look up here on my screen, you will see blab.im/ and my Twitter handle, which is Laughing Elaine. If you jump on over to that will come up to my profile page, and you will either find the link for the upcoming Blab that starts at 3 p.m. today, just in a few minutes, or you can find the replay of our continuing discussion. Jumping on into a Blab and participating in the conversation is a lovely thing to do. It's very, very easy to do on Blab, so we hope some of you will join us on over there, live or replay. I'm now going to salute all of you for spending the time with us here. We know your time is valuable. I salute you. Flockers, now join us over in the Flocker room over on Blab, and we'll see you. Thank you so much for joining us today to fuel your moving forward and finding fabulous. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Molly.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me.